Hello and welcome to another lap guide for the iRacing Camel GT series. This week we're at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Here's the lap first. All right, lap time there's a 57,974. We have late afternoon weather this week. So I use the default weather for my testing, 87 Fahrenheit track temp. And before I get into the turn-by-turn analysis here, I just want to talk a little bit about downforce. And so initially, I did my testing with a one-wing setup to see what I could get out of the car with very, very little downforce, obviously, low downforce dive planes. And the best I could manage with the setup I was working with was a 58,698. You can see with the one wing, as expected, it's going to be the quickest setup on the final section of the track, or the final sector. Where you're out on the oval, and obviously that's also your best passing zone. So I was a little bit worried about adding downforce, being that is your best opportunity to get around someone. But there were some other issues with running one wing. It's a very bumpy track here. And as far as consistency goes, and even trying to get out onto the oval section as you come up on out of the infield area, it's actually really tough to get a good run into it. And so that actually slows your entry, and it's also very risky as far as losing control of the car there. And so just being able to run consistent laps, quick consistent laps, I had a lot of trouble with that with the one wing setup. And so I went to a three wing, did some testing there, was able to actually find some better time overall, a little bit of consistency, but still wasn't feeling fully comfortable with the car, and went ahead and jumped up to a four wing. And that's when I actually started to finally feel comfortable and consistent and could run lap after lap of pretty consistent times, but also was actually happy that I was able to get pretty close on the sector 3 time with the four wing. Less than a full tenth from the one wing, which is, I think, attributed to being able to get out onto the oval much more cleanly and safely, getting the power down much more easily there. So it'll get a better run into that sector, but then of course toward the end of that sector, the one wing will close that gap, and it'll be quicker. But that's also assuming opponents can kind of keep up with you there. That will also present some issues. Obviously if you're running mid-pack and you're trying to get around a slower driver where he's going to be quicker on the oval, and you may have to just find a way to kind of put a little pressure or get him out of the optimal driving line, because anywhere outside of this optimal driving line is real risky on that one wing. It's going to be a challenge to maintain control. There's some bumps in the track, and I'll talk about some of those. I've actually kind of altered and adjusted my line a little bit to try to keep it through the smoother portions of the track, and also to make sure that I could also run a quick time. So let's go ahead and jump back to the start of the lap and go through this now turn by turn. Okay, so the braking point coming into turn 1. I start to brake right about toward the end of the signage here on the right. So you'll see I'll start to get into the brakes right at about that point. Obviously you want to be right up close to the wall here to maximize the amount of speed you can carry through turn 1. Turn 1 is actually one of the riskiest and most dangerous corners on the track. Number one, because still with four wing, you don't have a whole lot of downforce. And as you come around, it's kind of a late, sharp turn, and you really want to avoid the grass if you can at all. If you get up into the grass a little bit, that'll be enough to unsettle the car, and you can lose control and you're going to be off into the wall. In addition, if you don't get back to throttle right at about the just past or at the apex here, the rear end is actually going to kind of lighten up enough that your rear end is going to come loose as well. So you really want to make sure you're focusing on getting back to throttle just as you come off this corner to get that weight transfer to the back, get a little bit more weight on that on the rear end so that you don't have that come around on you. If you find yourself late braking this corner, what'll happen is you'll be turning in a little bit late. You'll be off braking and trying to get the car turned in. You won't be back to throttle just because you're carrying too much speed into the quarter, and as a result of that, your rear end is going to break free and it'll come around on you. And so most important thing on turn one is to make sure that you hit your mark as you turn in, and to make sure that you're prepared to get on throttle just as you come across that apex. And that'll ensure that as long as you're not running wide and you're able to get to throttle here because you're not carrying too much speed, then you're not going to carry too much speed and take yourself right up into the wall here. So that's the most important thing I think to keep in mind there with turn one. Let's go ahead and play that through at speed. So that's a downshift into third gear for that corner. Threshold brake was about 75% or so, and you can't brake real hard for very long there. You will lock up, not having as much downforce. So that threshold braking was real quick and released pretty quickly as well. So as you're coming around turn two, I like to just kind of keep it fairly close to the white line here on the inside. You're also going to be steering the car a bit with a throttle, with the way I have the car set up here. So you're going to modulate throttle to kind of control the amount of steering that you have to kind of help guide the car gradually over here to the left side. And then as you set up to enter into turn three, what I've done is I've just kind of tried to straighten this out a little bit, come up pretty close to the line. You can actually cross over this line on the right. No off track for doing that if you want to straighten that out just for even further safety. Because what will happen is you come down here into turn three. Again, is if you're carrying just a little bit too much speed, then the rear end can come around on you. So I like to try to straighten that out and kind of get a braking zone that kind of gets the car straightened up heading toward the outside line here. So you'll see a little bit of braking done there as well. Not a whole lot of braking needed because I'm just really trying to get the speed of the car at a kind of a nice, consistent, even level. So there's not a whole lot going on weight transfer wise. You don't want any sudden weight transfer to the front or to the rear. You just want to carry a nice, consistent, even speed through this set of corners to make sure that you aren't going to have traction loss issues. So the first braking that I do coming into turns 3 and 4 here is I get the car straightened up over here to the left-hand side, and I come off full throttle, third gear still, and I'll actually wait to shift down. You could shift down into second gear here, but I like to wait and shift down into second after I've come around turn 3 at a point where the car is more balanced, where the downshift is actually less likely to unsettle the car a little bit. So I'll have about a 50% brake right at about this point here. So I don't know, I guess about midway down the left-hand side here, just a quick 50% brake, easing off, and then just making sure the car is balanced and kind of turning in and gradually turning, not too sharp, letting the car run out wide. You could actually run out a little wider here, and I haven't gotten real comfortable with getting the right amount of speed to run all the way out closer to the grass there comfortably, but you could come out a little bit wider and potentially get a little bit better run off of turn 4. So that's some improvement there that could potentially be made. Then the additional braking that you see me doing here is actually right around my downshift. So I'm actually just tapping brakes a little bit. I'm also downshifting into second, and I really at this point just want to make sure the car is as settled as possible, because you want to get the car settled for this turn-in point and make sure that you're not carrying too much speed so that you're not going to lose control before you get into this corner. Your apex point, or what you're aiming for, is again the line here to the right, but don't cross over that much. If you cross over, there's a bump here on the right hand side, so that'll definitely unsettle the car and could delay your throttle off the corner. So you want to definitely delay that, avoid just getting off over the white line there. On the exit as well, just try to avoid coming up into the dirt. There's bumps, and obviously you're going to have traction loss issues. Also be mindful of all of the dirt that's going to be kind of kicked up onto the racing surface over the course of a race. And so keep an eye out for that, and try to be mindful of your throttle input coming off this corner, as the traction and the grip levels may begin to be reduced at that point. All right, so let's look at 3 and 4 at speed. All right, so coming up to turn 5, you'll notice as I approach turn 5 that I actually come in before. It almost seems like I'm turning in a little early. There's 2 reasons for that. One is that I'm actually just kind of straightening out the car into my first braking zone. I'm going to treat this again as 2 separate braking zones. But in addition to that, there's actually a bump right here that will, the further you are to the left here, if you hit that bump, it actually spoils your braking, in the sense that the car is going to come up, you're going to lighten up a lot, and then your braking capability is going to be severely reduced because of the car taking a bit of a hop there. So you want to avoid that bump there on the left. There will be a hop, and then if you hit that hop and you're just not going to be able to get any braking done, you're not going to be able to slow down enough for this corner, and you'll be off in the grass in a hurry. So avoid that bump. Make sure to just try to straighten the car out for some initial braking, and so that's why I turn in a little earlier here. And then just kind of aiming to get the car pretty close to this curbing to the right, and then I'll have my first braking zone there, leaving the car in 3rd gear. There'll be about 50% brake, and then I'm off brakes. I want to make sure the car is balanced as I come off the corner. Again, very light inputs at this point, just to making sure the car's settled and balanced. And I'll let the car run out wide all the way to the grass here. And this is also where I'll downshift into 2nd gear and my second braking zone. So there's going to be just real light 20-30% braking. So again, just light, because again, I don't want to shift the weight of the car too far forward. I don't want too much bite on the front end, and I want to make sure that as I turn in and downshift, that I can reach the curbing here to the right. I would avoid hitting that curbing here to the right. Again, just way too unsettling, but you want to get pretty close to it. You don't want to turn in too sharply here, and so it's important to make sure that you've run out wide a bit. You can see that I'm actually coming close to where there's some gravel out here on the road. I don't know if that actually affects grip levels or if that's just part of the texture. I'm guessing it's just a texture. I'm not sure. But anyway, I run all the way out to the grass here to make sure to give myself kind of a nice wide turning radius. I don't like to turn in too sharply here. It is a point that you can see it's bumping around enough that it can unsettle the car. So just kind of taking it nice and easy. And then all the way through turns 6, 7, and 8, your throttle inputs are going to be just kind of modulating speed. And also, as you come up over the little crest here of the hill, you've got to lift on throttle a bit, because the car is going to lighten up, and you're going to light up the rear tires if you don't. So definitely kind of lift up a bit there as the car lightens, and as grip levels are going to reduce there. And then begin to turn in. So before I get into that, let's go ahead and play 5 and 6 here at speed. All right, so come down into turn 7. One other quick note about the hill here. If you do happen to have a little bit too much throttle and you can hear your rear tires squealing, if you spin them a little bit, you're going to be heating them up a bit, and you're probably going to have a little bit reduced grip levels coming through turns 7 and 8. So you may want to take a little extra caution coming through here, and not try to take the optimal amount of speed that you normally might. So bear that in mind. At any point, obviously, through the track where you're overworking the tires, you're probably going to need to just take it easy a little bit to make sure that you don't lose control of the car as a result. My apex point for this is right up next to the grass here on the left, where the corner kind of sharpens. So I'll kind of apex pretty close to that, but then I like to let the car run all the way out pretty close to the grass here on the right. I don't ever get probably much closer than that. I don't like to kind of flirt with getting on my tire off into the dirt. You could probably take a little bit wider line here. It's important to make sure you get a nice wide entry into the corner here as you come up onto the oval. You really want to kind of angle inward and get the car turned left, I guess, as much as you can. You don't want to hit it at too much of an angle straight on, I guess, because it's going to be a little smoother coming up onto the oval. The straight, and I guess the straighter the car is with the oval itself. And so I'm kind of aiming to get my view centered with this last part of the S. So I noticed as I kind of went back and looked at my smoother, quicker runs through here, where my line was and where the car was positioned. And my view was almost always kind of centered with right about the tail end of this S here. And so that's kind of the point that I aim for. Is I'm coming through here. I don't want to cut in too tight. There's actually a bump over here on the left that can delay your throttle and put the car into a little bit of a bounce. So as long as you start with a nice wide entry, and then you start to turn inward, aiming to kind of come across this S here in the lettering there, then I think that you'll be able to pretty consistently get to full throttle and hold full throttle all the way up into the bankment, and avoid having to lift. Obviously, it is your most important corner on the track for passing. So if you don't get a good exit here, the car gets unsettled and you've got to lift, or you've got to lift to avoid running up into the wall here, then that's going to spoil your passing opportunity, or you're going to be passed yourself. And so very important to practice this corner and to hit this well. Starting in second gear, and as I think I mentioned, all the way through turns 6, 7, and 8, just modulating throttle and getting the speed of the car. You're again using the throttle to kind of steer the car, controlling the oversteer versus understeer for where you need the car to be. And so very good throttle control, I think, is going to be important. And then as you come through, you're now shifting up into third, and you're going to carry third gear all the way up onto the oval bank, and then of course shifting up from there. So let's go ahead and play that through at speed. So you notice I don't really quite reach full throttle until just before I've come up off the apron onto the oval, and I'm able to hold full throttle there because the car's actually settled at that point, and I'm hitting it at an angle where it just doesn't quite unsettle the car too much to cause to lose control. What I found usually would happen where I would lose control here is I was hitting at an angle further here to the right, maybe, where the car wasn't turned left parallel with the oval bank there, and what was happening was the right rear was bouncing, and as it bounced, it would lose traction, and then I would slide. While I'm talking about the right rear is going to be the tire that you're going to be want to be most careful with. It's going to heat up the most. In my testing, the heat levels in the right rear were getting to a point where just at race pace for 8 to 10 laps or so, I was having to kind of be mindful of it and be careful with it. With traffic and where you've got some opportunities to kind of slow up and check up a bit, to give those tires a bit to kind of cool down a little, I think that will help with the right rear, but otherwise that right rear may give you some issues, so try not to carry too much speed into corners, left-handers, where that right rear is going to start to lose traction because of the heat that's going to build up in that's going to take the most punishment. You'll notice in the setup how I've actually got lower pressures actually in the right rear as well, because I'm trying to keep the pressures at a good point where it's comfortable as well. But anyway, that's something to be mindful of. So for the rest of the lap, I let the car run out wide out here onto the oval. I come up high on the bankment and dive down in, getting down close to the white line or the apron to make sure that I can keep the momentum up. And so starting up high here, you can see that I'll start to kind of turn in maybe just past this white line, or just at that white line roughly. And I'll start to kind of turn in and gradually bring the car down. And as it's coming down off the higher part of the bank there, it's going to help carry momentum through this corner. And just trying to straighten out the road here and keep momentum up. And for a qualifying lap, just keeping it tight to the left here, and then just straightening out your exit. and that'll get you a quick lap time. So there's a lap of Charlotte Motor Speedway. Hope you found it helpful, and I'll talk to you later.